you present the view that the world, this is throughout the book, right, that the world is becoming more left hemisphere dominated. You also argue that intelligence, and we'll come to what it is and how it's measured, but that intelligence is right hemisphere dominated. Now, if you put these things together, you should expect that intelligence is dropping. But at least the measurements or the IQ has been reported to be going up. And so there's something there that needs to be clarified in order to understand how we square these three things together. And that's what your chapter is about. So let's go into it.
Yes, that's right. There are a number of elements that have to be fed into that picture. But I suppose a good place to start would be with a study done in 2014 with 158 patients for whom we had an IQ measurement prior to a stroke and after the stroke. And we also have scans of the brain. And in this study, what they did was look at the best measure of intelligence, which is that of fluid intelligence. I need to just unpack that a bit. There's fluid intelligence is a kind of intelligence that doesn't depend on acculturation. It doesn't depend on knowledge of elements that are peculiar to a culture. And it measures the ability of the mind to think freely, to solve problems imaginatively that they couldn't necessarily be prepared for. That's probably the best test of intelligence. And in this study, they looked exactly at GF, which is the fluid intelligence measurement. And what is absolutely extraordinary is that, and I show the scan, it's reproduced in the book, it shows that virtually all the places in the brain where there was damage associated with a drop in IQ are in the right hemisphere, not in the left. So that may surprise a lot of people who think, well, I can understand you saying emotional and social intelligence is more dependent on the right hemisphere, but surely the sort of cognitive intelligence which is measured by IQ tests, that must surely be more left hemisphere dependent. However, as I've mentioned before, the left hemisphere doesn't really have a good understanding of what it does. It carries out procedures, but what they actually mean, it is not so good at understanding as the right hemisphere. So there is some fairly incontrovertible evidence, and it chimes exactly with other measures, other studies of intelligence, which suggest that, in particular, people who are at the top end of the IQ scale tend to rely more on the right hemisphere than the left, and that precociously bright children use the right hemisphere more than the left compared with other children, and that particularly maths intelligence, which I suppose in some ways is the ultimate test of cognition, the ability to look at, understand, and progress with a mathematical problem, is very strongly loaded on the right hemisphere. And I think that's a very important point to mention, because people think that maths might be a sort of left hemisphere thing, but it's only the routine slog that's in the left hemisphere. It's only the ability to follow a procedure which you learnt at school, how you multiply, but actually being able to understand the shapes, the forms that lead you to predict the next item in a sequence, or to understand a form of mathematics that involves seeing a whole, seeing a gestalt, rather than just working away on a detail. All of that is much more dependent on the right hemisphere. And that's it's a controversial area, which is why I don't spend an enormous amount of time on it. I think one has to accept that it's casuistry to say that we don't know what intelligence is. In life, we all know perfectly well people we can see are extremely intelligent and others who are not. And I quote, I think, a rather good definition of intelligence that was published by Linda Gottfriedson and another 50-odd scientists. And effectively, it's not being able to carry out routine procedures. It is precisely the ability to see your way through problems, seeing what is specific to this question.
Well, I already have